when I was asked to speak and originally picked up on this subject, we had various lists of topics that we could choose from. And I didn't realize quite how close to the bone that this actual topic would come to me. And I'll explain as I go through in the introduction why it was actually, in a way, cathartic, but also quite painful to look at this subject and talk about things as a recovering perfectionist, because I suddenly realized that maybe it's actually relevant to me in more ways than I'd like to admit. So just to start with a little bit about me, I've been through the whole of my professional life an adult educator, been involved in teaching people, usually informally rather than formally, which I prefer a lot more, because in formal classes you are forced to go into very restricted ground and to teach in a specific way. And I like to have people who want to be there and to study in their own way rather than being restricted by a certain set of rules. When I came to Israel nearly 20 years ago, the education market was absolutely flooded with people. So I talked to somebody who was in high tech, and he said, well, our company might have some jobs available and I'll see what's available. And there just happened to be a job available in high tech, in QA testing. And having had no experience in QA testing, I went into an interview. They showed me a classic login screen and said, what would you test for? And obviously I answered the questions well enough that I was actually able to get the job. But during that job, in the few years I was there, I found myself gravitating more and more to the support desk and talking to the support people there, because I was interested in the customer interaction, working with people and talking to them rather than just sitting on the machine and testing. And so with a mixture of those two skills, I then, after a few years, discovered that there was this sort of new career opportunity called customer success, which is a mixture of support, but it's also much more than support, because it involves talking to people, working out what their problems are, and helping them to develop their own processes, their own ideals with the work that they're doing, and to come out with ideas which they can then share and use in their own environments. And having had experience in testing, when I applied for a job at Practitest, fortunately for me, and I hope fortunately for the company as well, I succeeded in getting the job and have worked here at Practitest for now over 6 years. So I have quite a bit of corporate memory, remember a lot of the things which have been tried and used. And one of the things I like about working at a small company like this, relatively speaking, although obviously we have a lot of customers and do a lot of work, is that we don't have rule books and we don't have scripts that we work from. We have to work out everything from ourselves. And intellectually, that's a much greater challenge. And one of the things I absolutely love about working with people is that light bulb moment. You can go through a process, work with people, and they're not quite getting it. And then suddenly the light bulb goes on and they say, oh, you mean like this? And then they take it beyond what you were explaining and suggesting, and they feed back and give you ideas as well. And I think Joel mentioned this earlier when he was speaking, that we learn a lot from our own customers as well. When he's talking architecture of the system and solutions, we also see it just like he does, that people go beyond what we originally thought and give us ideas and help us to learn about both processes and testing, as well as the actual use of test management systems as well. I'm married with 4 kids. That's a picture of the wife and the children. At the last time they allowed me to take a picture, which was about a year and a half ago, they're most of them photophobic and don't like to be pictured. So that's a picture which I managed to smuggle in and to include. And on top of that, as I alluded to before, I do have a bit of a secret. And that is that I am a recovering perfectionist. It may sound great to be a perfectionist, bleh, can't even say it now, but there are problems about it as well. The symptom is, of course, with a perfectionist, that you always have to be right. But that's good, except when you're dealing with your wife, who often believes that you shouldn't be right. I know that my wife got me a fridge magnet many years ago. She's gone beyond that stage now and knows that I'm not right half of the time. That's probably because I'm recovering. But she got me a fridge magnet which said, when I married Mr. Right, I didn't know his first name was always. And so that's something which you sort of work out when you're doing perfectionism, that being always right is a problem rather than a solution, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you will only do something if you know it's going to be right. You can say, yes, perfectionism means you go on and on doing it till it's right, which is one aspect. But if you don't think it's going to be right, then you don't want to do it in the first place. And so not only does it delay in results, but it also leads to things like procrastination and atrophy as well, whereby you'll put off doing something if you fear that it's not going to work out 100% correct. And it also leads to a complete state of atrophy, which is the greatest form of procrastination, where you don't actually do anything at all. And I think working through this and trying to realize that the therapy for this is accepting that sometimes you will be wrong. We can't be right all of the time. Sometimes we make mistakes, and that will be both in personal life and professional life as well. And working from that, it's trying to become less risk averse. So we're trying to avoid being avoiding all risk and saying, yes, we'll take risks sometimes, and sometimes we'll be wrong, sometimes we'll make mistakes, but we learn from those mistakes. And as long as we actually learn from the mistakes, then we can accept that failure, and we can continue and make sure that we become more productive and more effective in what we're doing. And I can take this message into the testing arena as well, that yes, I was a tester and I moved out of testing, but part of the reason possibly why I did move out of testing was because I hadn't gone through this sort of internal therapy of realizing that it is sometimes okay to make mistakes and get things wrong as well. You could do testing, you could do the wrong testing, and sometimes you will come out with results which are wrong. But as long as, of course, it's not a mission critical situation where lives are going to be at risk, then you accept the testing, and you accept that most of us, I don't think, are in mission critical situations. We're not testing, as Joel again said earlier, the 737 MAX. And so we have to be less risk averse, accept that things will not always be perfect, and learn our lessons when things do go wrong. So perfectionism in testing, well, if you want to be perfect in testing, then, and of course, this is a list which is totally impossible to follow, you would test everything that you can possibly think of, and preferably multiple times. At every change in the code or environmental systems, you would again retest everything. You would never execute anything until it's been fully planned. So not just write your tests, but plan your tests long in advance and keep planning them. Micromanage every aspect of your testing. If you have a team underneath you, go in and make sure that everyone's following your rules exactly to the letter. This is, of course, absolutely wrong for a test manager to act this way. Never release until every bug is fixed. And then if you do find a bug after it's been released into production, get very depressed and possibly consider your position and whether you should be resigning. Now, that is the sort of thing that you could end up with if you're going to take your perfectionism to the nth degree with regard to testing. That doesn't mean, of course, that you should be sloppy in your testing and go in totally the opposite direction. It means be conscientious, be careful, but don't try and be a perfectionist, a complete perfectionist either when it comes to testing. Accept that perfectionism is something that you will never in reality achieve. And therefore, because you never will achieve it, doesn't mean you shouldn't try in the first place, but what it means is you just do the best that you can. What are realistic expectations then of testing? Well, it depends on the sort of environment and procedures that you're testing with. If you've got a waterfall environment, rapidly disappearing, very few people still test in waterfall. You have plenty of time to test. You can retest all your changes. Your deadlines are usually, relatively speaking, flexible because you have so much time in which to fit your testing into. And of course, things go up the line and down the line, hence the name waterfall. And so you will only get the testing stage when it comes to when the development's been done. You'll then feed your results back. The developers will then work on your bugs. It will come back to you to retest. And hopefully within your period, however long it is, whether it's a quarter, half a year, whichever period, you will be able to complete your testing. Of course, the pressure increased tremendously when it came to Agile, and people started using usually sprints in Agile, maybe 2-week sprints. And so you need to use your planning time well. You have a much shorter time to test and more rigid deadlines. And you don't, when you have to finish have a code freeze on a certain day, and then the release after the weekend, then you have to be ready for that, and you have to have your testing done by then. And taking it to the nth degree, going even further, with regard to DevOps, you've got very fast times to release that you may not even have a complete sprint. You may be releasing into production, CI/CD, and therefore sometimes you will have to rely, or not sometimes, but always, you will have to rely on feedback from the users as well. As we were talking about before, you have the situation whereby you're going into this sort of infinity shape, whereby you have the left side, which is the development and collaboration. On the right-hand side, you have your testing in production. So you go around your continuous feedback, and your continuous feedback will come into the testing side as well. And here is the classic diagram where you have your shift left, shift right. You have your shift left with regard to testing in development. You have your shift right with regard to testing in production. And right in the middle of that, you have continuous feedback. So you will be looking for feedback from your customers. If they find bugs, you will be reporting them. And some of your testing will be inadvertently, but in reality, done by your customers who are actually using the system as well. So with regard to this, now that we've got this sort of map and picture of what's going on, how do we use this to help our testing and to make our testing more efficient? And one of the big things which is modern and has been brought in from other areas as well is being able to do a risk analysis. You look at your risk analysis and say, what do I need to test more extensively? What do I need to test less extensively? And one of the methods to do this is the FMEA model, which is failure modes and effects analysis. And what you need to do first here is to work out what are going to be your areas that you're going to be testing. You're going to look at your components, your modules, your dependencies, and what are the limitations of your time. And a lot of this you won't be able to do yourself because it will require specialist knowledge. But in a test environment, we have our SMEs, our subject matter experts. When it comes to development, those SMEs will be the developers. When it comes to what is going to actually be produced, the functionalities, then it's going to be either users, sometimes UATs, user acceptance testers, or it may be your product managers who are going to have defined what the specification for any particular feature or anything which needs to be done is. And so you're going to need to brainstorm with these people. So the developers, to make sure that you are testing based on what is being changed in the code. You know, which modules are connected to each other? Can changes in code in one particular module affect a totally different module? If you see that a feature has been developed, am I going to have to test something which seems to be totally unrelated to it, but maybe on the back end, in the black box of things, it may actually be related? So the SMEs, as far as developers are concerned, are absolutely vital. So if you bring up a list of test areas that you're looking at, to talk to a developer and say, you know, are these areas related? If you've made a change to this, do I need to test this other thing? Then that can be very useful in being able to know these things. And the other end of it is the use of the use cases. If you're testing something which was not the intended use and you're passing it based on the wrong use, then that's also a limitation. So you need to be able to look at the particular sides of what you're testing and say, is this the use case? Sometimes the user stories will have it clearly. Sometimes you may have to speak to a product manager to be able to clarify exactly what the use case is and what the pass and failure criteria would be for that use case. Or it may be a user who's a professional user who's used to using this particular piece of software and knows what to expect from it. And if you go to him and say, can you help me? I need to be able to work out my testing criteria for this. He'll be able to help you and clarify those things as well. But then once we've got our areas defined, we need to look at what the risks with regard to them are. And there are 3 areas which we talk about with regard to the failure modes. And those are severity, priority, and likelihood. Severity and priority would be familiar to us all as testers, because when we write bugs, we talk about severity and priority as well. But do we always know exactly what we're talking about when we go and we put on a severity and priority? And it's relatively specific with regard to the FMEA model. The severity would be severity 1, the highest severity of all, would be a loss of data. The next level down would be loss of functionality. The third level would be, yes, you lose the functionality, but there's a workaround that you can use it. The next level, number 4, would be partial loss of functionality, possibly with or without a workaround. And the final lowest level of all is a trivial severity, that it makes a trivial difference to the use of the system. With regard to priority, you would have unacceptable loss of being able to use the system. Partial loss of the system would be the number 4 level, going down to acceptable reductions and then minor reductions in use, and possibly even at the lowest level, no reductions in use at all. And then the final area is likelihood. Does it affect all users? Does it affect some users? Is it possible that it might affect some users? And at the lowest level, would it limit only a few users, or hardly, if any users at all, that it's almost unimaginable that it would make an effect? And so we've got scores of 1 to 5 for all of these 3 areas. And you note down these scores for each of the tests which you want to put in. And then once you've done that, you multiply them by each other to get a risk priority number. So it's something which is the highest priority, you're going to have 3 1s, and that will give you a total score of only 1. If you've got 3 3s, then that's 3 is 27, which is much lower down. And so by multiplying these numbers together, you get your risk priority number. And if you have a risk priority number of 1 to 10, then you need to do extensive testing on it, covering in and out all the features and all the modules which you're dealing with. If you have 11 to 30, then you do a balanced level of testing. You cover all major basic functionalities of the feature or module, but you wouldn't do complete testing on it. 31 to 70, we do opportunity testing, covering basic functionality, but no more. And above 70, either no testing at all, or only testing when time permits, and just reporting any severe anomalies which you get as a result of that. And so this gives quite a detailed testing risk, and being able to decide which tests you're going to run and when you're going to run them, depending on what the risk of having severe repercussions of not testing is. There are many other methods also of doing your testing as well, and setting up your testing. One of the new methods which is coming in nowadays is AI. FactoryTest, just as an example, is covering that. I can't speak for other test management systems, but we're looking into AI in 2 regions. Firstly, value scores, trying to work out the value of different tests, how valuable they are. That's one method we're using, but we're also trying to speed up the writing of tests as well, that we're just beginning to integrate ChatGPT into our test script writing, so that you can ask it based on a title and a short description to then go and write your test steps for you. It's very early days. We're sort of between alpha and beta stages with regard to it. And obviously, being ChatGPT, it will improve over time and it will get better. But at the moment, it's a basic functionality which can help tremendously in speeding up with the writing of simple tests. And also not just speed up, but also give you better test steps as well. Sometimes we're inclined in a hurry to either miss out test steps or miss out an idea which we could have put into a test step because we haven't thought of it. ChatGPT will often do that and will give you the opportunity to hone your testing and make it more accurate in your writing of test steps as well. A second method is to reverse think your testing. You start with your happy path, and then you think, well, what could go wrong with this happy path? You imagine what bugs that you could come up with in the happy path, what could go wrong, and then you write your tests to cover those bugs which you have imagined. Now, obviously, that is limited by your imagination, but in combination with other methods as well, that can help you with writing and thinking up new tests, almost sort of similar to an exploratory sort of method where you explore in your mind what problems you could have and then write up tests to cover those problems. We also have business value-based testing as well. You look at what the financial value of a particular test case and a particular result would be, and financial value could either be in the functionality or it could be in the customer satisfaction as well. If you're going to have dissatisfied customers as a result of you having messed up something in particular, then that's important to look at as well. So if you have something which is a feature which has been specifically requested by customers, you're going to want to test it well enough to make sure that those customers are satisfied with it, or that the functionality in general is going to fulfill at least an MVP so that the customers will be satisfied with the results of it. And finally, you can look at dependency based. You can look at your different dependencies based on preconditions and on post conditions and flows. And so these are several methods of looking at ways of determining the importance of testing and particular tests and how to prioritize your testing. There are other methods as well, but these are just a few which I wanted to air today. Then once you've got your tests, you need to manage your testing. It's all very well saying, well, I've written 1,000 brilliant tests and they're absolutely crucial to my testing, but I'm just going to stick them into a spreadsheet of 1,000 tests and I'll never see them again because they'll all get lost and I'll never be able to find them again. So we need a way of managing our testing. And this is where test management systems come in. And although I alluded to perfectionism as a problem in testing, another problem for me in testing was testing off spreadsheets and having to work on spreadsheets, just work through the spreadsheets, then write up bugs on another in Jira manually, and being able to not have a continuous flow of testing and being able to test in an organized way. And the use of a test management system allows you to firstly orchestrate your tests and organize them in an efficient way, but also, of course, to execute them as well efficiently. So the test management system allows you to split your tests, organize them by different areas. So you may have functional testing, you may have regression testing, smoke testing, sanity testing, other forms of testing which you want to do as well. And for those, a test management system can be absolutely vital in organizing them and knowing which tests are going to be where, quickly pulling them out. The amount of time that you save from searching through a pile of different spreadsheets, all hidden away in different folders, to find exactly what you need to test. And rather than just having a filter showing your group of tests which you need to test for any particular type of functionality, is absolutely tremendous and will save you alone enough time to justify having a test management system. Then, of course, the next thing about a test management system is it's easy to reuse your tests. You write your tests relatively generically without using specific parameters or permutations in them, and then you can reuse your tests very easily. You can pull them out, you can use them for one environment, you can use the same test for another environment. And so having them in an organized fashion, in filters where you can see tagged specifically by different groups, allows you to have easy reuse of your tests, easy traceability, so that you can connect your tests to your requirements. You can connect your test runs to your bugs as well. And this all avoids duplication of work and trying to look for things in multiple places. Then to talk about frequency, if you're running regression tests, having a test management system can easily help you organize regression packs so that you can have different packs for regression. You can have an AB or an ABC regression pack that you're going to run at different times. And you just pull up the regression pack that you need at any time and execute it. And you don't need to then go and decide what tests on any day that you're going to put in to a particular regression and go searching for them. They're all there and waiting available for you. The number of tests that need to be executed in each phase of an ERP project. Well, if you have all your phases organized in your test management system, you can see how many tests there are in each. And if you need to bring on extra testers for a particular phase, that becomes easy to plan and to do based on the number of tests that you're going to have to do at that particular phase of the project. So planning and organization become much easier and much faster as well with regard to using test management. You can also feed your automation results into test management systems. There's nothing more frustrating than having to look in 20 different places in all your CD tools, pulling out all the results from different places, bringing them into a spreadsheet or into a Confluence page or SharePoint page to be able to see the results, and manually having to do that, or for automation results, probably every day. Whereas if you can automatically download them into your test management system, you get the graphs produced for you in your test management system. If you have iframes or something like that to be able to embed them into Confluence, then you have, or into SharePoint, then you can have them exactly in the right page, updating automatically without any intervention from you at all. And finally, having alluded to downloading and using the dashboard information, use your dashboards. You have dashboards in any test management system. I know from PractiTest, from personal experience, we have a vast selection of dashboards, and they can show progress of how you're testing. Again, you don't need to manually set up a dashboard every time. Once it's there, and you just use it, and it saves you tremendous amounts of time, and reports for planning and auditing as well. I was speaking to somebody just last week who said, well, before we were using a test management system, it took us a day and a half to set up our reports for an audit. Now we just press a couple of buttons and it's done, and that's it. And finally, as we go on into the future, as I talked about before, AI to determine which test cases you need to run as higher priority tests, and to help you in writing those tests as well. So these are all ways in which you can manage your testing and be organized in it. Just to give you a couple of screenshots, a couple of ideas from our own system. As I said, I work with PractiTest, so I know it well. So that's the screenshots I'm using at the moment, but others may be available as well. Accelerating your testing, talking about being able to use different types of tests. Here we are, auto filter by test type. I've got my functional tests, my regression tests, my sanity tests, UAT tests, etc. And then within my tests, I have my traceability, which shows me which test suites these are in, and I can even run them directly from the traceability tab of my test case. I've got my linked issues showing my traceability. Here are my issues, my bugs, which have been created in Jira, and they're showing their statuses, their present statuses. One's in progress, 2 are done, and I'm linked to a requirement, which is showing that requirement is failed because there are other tests which are linked to that requirement as well, which are failed. Because even though these are all passing, all the copies, the instances of this test are passing, nevertheless, there may be some in other places that are failing with other test cases. So just an idea of just looking at a test management system, the quick information that you can gather from it. Here's a sample of a test set, a test suite, where you have your execution folder. Some people call them scenarios. Here we've got our tests within them, and you can see the step status. We can see any linked issues. We can see the ability to run them, click off a run, start a run quickly. And you'll also see that if you have automation tests, you'll be able to bring them into a test suite like this as well. Download them into a test suite so that you'll have all your results here as well. You can see who the actual tester was. The assigned to may be different, but nevertheless, we've got all of our information that we need over here. And in different test suites here like this, you can do different cycles, which can be identical, but they're just marked differently for different permutations. Supposing I need to test this group of tests on 3 different browsers. We're dealing with something which is browser-based. I need to test it on 3 different browsers. Easy. I just click the clone button with permutations, tell it to make permutations for my 3 different browsers, and then it will make 3 test suites with 3 different browsers in it, and I can test them, each of them independently and separately, get all the results for each of them. They'll automatically appear on the dashboards. It's all quick and easy, much quicker than trying to organize something in spreadsheets or do it manually on sheets of paper even. I've noticed some people who even use either Word documents, print them out, and then mark them with pens and on pieces of paper. Even that's been done. So this is much quicker and more efficient. Automation. I alluded to that before when I talked about downloading your automation. The word of the day is everything should be automated. We're all robotic here and we live in the 21st century. But should you really automate everything? The answer is, and I believe that there was a session yesterday about that as well. The answer is no, not everything should be automated, but some things should if you can. Firstly, tests which are to be used frequently and bring high value, those should be automated. Tests which are objective in their pass-fail criteria. If it's yes or no, pass or fail, something which is easy for automation to determine. Tests which are time-consuming to execute manually, or sometimes they might be difficult to automate, but if you can automate them, then that is a good case for automation as well. And tests which are easy to mess up if you perform them manually as well. That's also a good case for automation. But at the end of the day, use discretion. If you're the ones who have power over automation, it's an awesome responsibility as well as a great power. With great power comes great responsibility in this. Just because a test can be automated doesn't automatically mean that it should be. Speed up your bug tracking as well. You can use test management systems either standing alone with their own bug trackers within them and use them as an all-in-one, much in the way that HP ALM has always been. Most test management systems now have a bug tracking module where you can do your own bug tracking. The advantage of that is you can report bugs without needing to write up reproduction steps. The developers can work directly in your test management system to solve the bugs. And they're also fast and accurate for retesting with the traceability links to your failed runs as well. These things can also, on some test management systems, work with integrated bug trackers as well. For example, ours, yes, all of these advantages which you have, except for the developers working in the test management system, because they wouldn't need to. With regard to an integrated system, you could also report your bugs without needing to write them up and send the results directly to Jira or DevOps. You can have fast and accurate retesting with your traceability links to your failed runs, both from Jira and from DevOps as well. So you can report directly to your bug tracking system. Your PMs and your devs continue to work in their own systems while the information is synced directly between your test management system for your testers and your bug tracking project management systems for your PMs and devs as well. And so everyone can see what they need to see. They can see the statuses and people are able to retest as efficiently as possible as well. Finally, display your conclusions. Don't think, well, I've done my testing, that's the end of it. You need to be able to share what you've done. You need to be able to show the value of what you're doing as well. So if you can't share with your CTO, your head of product, whoever it is, your head of R&D, what you've been doing as a test management team, then you're in a difficult position. And test management systems allow you to showcase what you're doing, as well as helping to make decisions as well. If you see that you've got an unacceptably high number of failures on the graph, you can then say to your CTO or to your head of R&D, you can't release this version the way it is. The information here is the power, and the knowledge is the power for you to be able to justify what you want to tell your R&D team. Can we release? Can't we release? And so display all your conclusions. You can see how you're progressing, how fast you're progressing, the information that you've got, but also you can share it with others and show the information to your CTO and your head of product, because they're going to demand graphs, reports, etc. And if you can show them the executive summary and just bring it out and set it so that it runs automatically, they can look at it at any time. You don't have to be working on it. All the time when it's automatically regenerating itself, is time you don't have to spend on producing it yourself and working it for yourself. And so, to sum up, what have we learned in this particular session? Firstly, know what you are up against. Resources and time. How much time do you have to test? What sort of resources do you have? How many testers do you have to be able to spend the time? How much are you going to be able to invest in each cycle of testing you're doing? Implement some kind of risk analysis so that you can work out, because you're always going to have more to test than you actually have time to test. So do some risk analysis to work out what is the important things that need testing, what is the most vital testing that you have to do. Create a plan of what to test. Look at the areas and the scope of what you're testing. Keep your tests as generic as possible so that you can make them reusable and you can do permutations and parameters on them. Don't say in your test case, test this particular function on server A in browser B, because then that test is not reusable for browser A and environment C. Make the tests generic so that then you can do permutations or parameters on them. Assist your testers. Many times, depending on which industry you're in, if you're doing software development, then this isn't so true. But it may be even with developers. Developers aren't professional testers because we're having more and more developers doing testing. Assist them in their areas of testing. If you're doing something which is project-based, like an ERP system or an implementation, then again, they're definitely not professionals. UAT testers and SIT testers are not going to be professionals in testing. Assist them and help them with it. Give them guidelines, make things more efficient for them, give them an easier time. And at the same time, that will make your life easier as well, because firstly, they'll be more willing to work with you in your testing. And secondly, they'll feel valued and come out with the correct results as well. Sensible automation. As we said, not everything that can be automated should be automated. Automate the things which are important to automate, but leave out the things which shouldn't be automated. And at the end of the day, even if you can achieve 100% automation, you haven't achieved 100% automation because you need something to validate the automation. And so, yes, smarter automation, go around in cycles and always have a level of automation to test the automation. Call it a day and at least have a validation which is done manually, because a human will pick up things and think in different ways from the automation. And last in the list, share your results and conclusions, do your dashboarding and reports so that you're able to share all of your information and bring even more value to your testing and share it in good time with those who need to know about it. Thank you.
That was fantastic. As we said earlier, delivering software projects quickly, accelerating time to market is always a top of mind for a lot of industry professionals. I think you gave us really good insights there. So we have one question, if you've got another couple minutes.
Yep.
Okay, Jacob is asking something related to communication. He says at his company, seems to be a gap between the R&D folks and the QA team. It's as if the right hand does not speak to the left. And so they're having some communication problems. In your opinion, is test management something that could assist with communication issues?
Interesting. I think that we're sort of talking about quite an old-fashioned sort of model here where the testers are separate from the development team. Because as you go into Agile and you have testers embedded in the development teams, then that's something which has changed largely in recent years. But having talked about everyone talking to each other, if you're not going to get a mind shift, then yes, I think there is, especially if you're going to integrate your test management system with your bug tracking system. Because, and again, as I said before, I can only speak for Practitest here, but Practitest has this ability to show information inside the Jira panels, for example, that if you're using Jira for your project management, you can then see whether tests have been set up in your user story. there's a panel which will show your list of tests and what their last run status is. So your project manager can easily look into a user story, see, have you started the testing process? If you've started the testing process, then he'll see a list of tests. If you haven't started, there'll be nothing there. It will be blank. Then once you start running the tests, you'll start seeing statuses appearing for those tests. And if they're all marked as passed, then he'll know that you've completed your testing. Conversely, when it comes to the bug tracking side as well, you have exactly the same functionality. So you write up a bug in PractiTest, it gets created in Jira and synced back as a read-only copy to PractiTest. But in Jira, they will see the test run that failed. And then they're able to see what you've tested, how you've tested it. And then if you update it and you want to connect the bug when it's passed again to show that it's now passed, you can see that in a panel in Jira as well. And so the project managers and devs can see a lot of information from the test management solution. And on the other side as well, if you've got a test management solution running with your bug tracking, it makes it very easy to do retesting because the traceability links the runs to the bugs. And when you see a bug has been updated in the PractiTest side, it will show your status as being ready for testing. You can then just click on the traceability tab, hit the run again button, and then it will run the test again, and you'll be able to mark it and update it. And they, on the development side, will know that you've retested it and it's now passing. So
okay, so since everyone's seeing the same thing at the same time, so regardless of department or task, there's just visibility for...
Yeah, it brings a lot more visibility, I think, to both sides. And of course, dashboards, you can share dashboards. I don't know with other systems, but certainly with PractiTest, you don't need a license to be able to see dashboards or dashboard items embedded from PractiTest into your wiki systems as iframes. You can just be able to see visibility. And so you're sharing a lot of information. Comments also, they go backwards and forwards between the test management system and the bug tracking system as well. So you can write a comment in one. And if you don't want to communicate through whether it's Slack or any other method or having meetings with people, at least use the comments. You can comment backwards and forwards and people can write comments and see the comments, but going both ways.
Okay, great. So Jacob, I hope that answers your question about communication. I don't see any more questions at this time. If anyone has, please don't hesitate to send them our way. Any final thoughts from you, Antony?
No, I always evangelize the online test conference. It's been going for so many years, and thanks to originally Joel and Noah who set it up, because it is really something which is being copied across the world and badly when it came to COVID. That the online test conf, I believe, is still a beacon of shining light with regard to testing conferences online. And we participated in some conferences online, and I felt none of them were as good as the online test conference.
Well, thank you so much.